arrived on a Tuesday, slipped through the brass mail slot with the rest of the week's disappointments. Bills, a reminder about the dental checkup Eris Thorne kept forgetting to cancel, a flyer for a supermarket opening 2 towns over. It was heavier than the others, the paper thick and cream-colored, the ink a deep forest green. No return address, only her name, Elara Vance, and the address of her cramped city center apartment. Elara, who hadn't touched a living plant in 3 years. She frowned, turning the envelope over. The wax seal, a stylized Art Nouveau lily, was unbroken. It felt old, not antique, but weighted with something more than paper and glue. A relic from another time, another sensibility. She'd almost forgotten the crisp, clean scent of good stationery. With a sigh that fogged the cool glass of her window, she sank onto the edge of her unmade bed. The city's low thrum a constant vibration beneath the floorboards. Rain lashed against the pane, blurring the gray skyline into smears of charcoal and slate. Another day adrift in the undertow of grief. The world outside a reflection of the numbness within. Grief was a strange animal. It hadn't just taken her mother, 6 months ago, swift and cruel as a summer storm. It had taken Elara's world. The sun-drenched botanical gardens where she'd worked, the vibrant chaos of the plant nursery she'd poured her savings into, the simple, bone-deep joy of coaxing life from the soil. Now, the only green things in her apartment were the stiff, desiccated remains of a succulent she hadn't watered since the funeral, and a wilting potholes in the fire escape, gasping in polluted air. Plants were too alive, too painful. They reminded her of the warmth of her mother's hands, teaching her to repot ferns. The shared silence broken only by the rustle of leaves. Grief was loss, yes, but it was also the suffocating silence left behind. The space where a shared language of chlorophyll and root systems used to be. Elara Vance, botanist, was a ghost in her own life. She turned the envelope over again, the lily seal gleaming dully. No postage stamp. It hadn't come through the regular mail. Someone had placed it directly into her slot. A client? A solicitor handling her mother's meager estate, but the estate was settled. The house sold. There was nothing left but the silence and the crushing weight of memory. Curiosity, a fragile, unfamiliar bird, stirred in her chest. Weaker than it used to be, but there. She slid a finger under the flap, breaking the wax lily with a soft snick. The letter was written in the same deep green ink, the handwriting looping and elegant, almost calligraphic. A stark contrast to the blunt utility of her own scribbled notes on plant diseases and soil pH. Dearest Elara, your mother spoke of you often, of your light, and your gift for understanding the quiet language of growing things. She was so proud. We are in possession of a most unique botanical specimen, one that requires particular sensitivity, a particular ear star. Your mother believed you might be the only person left who could truly hear it, who could understand its needs. Asterisk. The position includes full residency at Blackwood Hall, a modest stipend, and access to one of the most singular private gardens in the country. Seclusion is guaranteed. The garden awaits your unique talents. Elara, it has been too long without a keeper who truly listens. Yours in anticipation. The estate of Alistair Thorne. Elara read it twice, then a third time. The words blurring as rain streaked the window pane like tears. Your mother spoke of you often. A lie. Her mother had been many things. Brilliant, kind, endlessly patient with ferns and fractious students. But she'd rarely spoken of Elara's career. Not after the nursery failed. Not after Elara retreated behind the high walls of academia, analyzing soil samples in sterile labs, the spark gone. Not after the silence had fallen between them two, in the long, aching months before the end. Her mother had understood the language of roots, yes, but she hadn't understood this barren, grief-stricken wasteland Elara had become. We are in possession of a most unique botanical specimen. Requires a particular ear. The garden awaits your unique talents. It has been too long without a keeper who truly listens. The phrasing was archaic, almost theatrical. Keeper, not botanist, not horticulturalist. Keeper, as if the garden were a sentient thing, a vault of secrets, and Elara the newly appointed guardian of its mysteries. And the stipend, it was generous. more than generous. Enough to keep the city wolves from her door for a year, perhaps longer. Enough to breathe, to not feel the constant, low-grade panic of rent and the dwindling savings her mother's illness had devoured. Seclusion, the word pulsed in the dim light of the apartment. An escape hatch, a way out of the gray, rain-slicked cage of the city, away from the suffocating silence of her empty life, away from the constant, low thrum of traffic that now sounded like the dying heartbeat of the world she'd lost. Before she could think too deeply, before the fragile bird of curiosity could be crushed by the leaden weight of her grief and cynicism, Elara found herself reaching for her phone, not to call the number listed. There was no number, only the name Blackwood Hall, but to book a train ticket, north, to the rain-lashed, wind-swept edge of the country where Blackwood Hall supposedly stood. The decision felt less like a choice and more like the inevitable tug of a deep, hidden current. Perhaps it was the grief talking, the desperate need for a change of air, a change of everything. Perhaps it was the simple, foolish hope that her mother had spoken of her, that somewhere in the quiet of her final days, she remembered the bright-eyed girl who talked to seedlings, and not the ghost who'd stood hollow-eyed at her funeral. Perhaps it was the lure of the unknown specimen, a puzzle, a mystery that demanded solving, a language waiting to be deciphered, something to do, something to feel again, even if it was only the sharp edge of fascination. The rain drummed a frantic rhythm on the roof as Elara packed a single suitcase, clothes for all weathers, knowing the north would be cold, wet, and unpredictable. Sturdy boots, her old, battered field notebook, its pages mostly empty now, a relic from brighter days. A small, framed photograph of her mother, kneeling in the sun-drenched nursery, laughing as she held a vibrant monstera leaf aloft. She left the desiccated succulent on the windowsill. Let it be a monument to the life she was leaving behind. Or perhaps, simply, she forgot it. The train journey north was a slow unwinding. Cities gave way to suburbs, then the patchwork fields shrouded in low mist, then the vast, brooding moorland. The rain was constant, a gray veil that blurred the landscape into smears of green and brown and heather purple. It felt like traveling backwards in time, or perhaps sideways, into a quieter, wilder world. The further she went, the more the tight knot of anxiety in her chest began, impossibly, to loosen. Not dissolve, but shift. She was met at the final, rain-swept station by a man in his late 60s, perhaps leaning against a Land Rover that looked like it had seen decades of service. He introduced himself as Mr. Hemlock, the estate manager. No first name offered. His face was a road map of wrinkles, like wind-scoured bark, and his eyes were the pale, watchful gray of a heron. He wore oilskin waterproofs and sturdy boots caked in peat. "Dr. Vance," he said, his voice a low rumble, like stones shifting in a stream. He took her suitcase without ceremony. Timely. The garden stirs early this year, or perhaps it senses a new ear. He didn't smile. The drive to Blackwood Hall was a winding, single-track lane through dripping beech woods, the trees forming a tunnel of wet, glistening green. The air grew colder, damper, thick with the scent of decaying leaves and rich, black earth and something else, something sweetly cloying, like overripe fruit left in the sun, and beneath it, a sharper, metallic tang. Ozone? Or something else? Elara rolled down the window a crack, despite the rain. The scent intensified, washing over her in waves, green and dark and alive in a way that sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. "Night bloomers," Mr. Hemlock said, noticing her intake of breath. "The garden's specialty. They're sensitive, responsive." He didn't elaborate. Blackwood Hall itself materialized from the mist and rain like a ghost ship run aground. It was a sprawling, eccentric structure of dark gray stone, covered in thick swathes of ivy that seemed to writhe in the wind. Turrets rose like broken teeth against the stormy sky, and rows of tall, narrow windows stared out like sightless eyes. It spoke of immense, faded wealth and generations of neglect. The gardens were a different story. Even from the rain-streaked windows of the Land Rover, Elara could see them. They spilled from the back of the hall in a seemingly endless cascade of terraces, winding paths, and hidden clearings, plunging down toward a steep, tree-lined ravine where a stream chattered unseen. It was a garden designed not for order, but for drama and seclusion. Topiary yews stood like silent sentinels, their shapes blurred by the rain. Clipped hedges, taller than a man, formed shadowed corridors that vanished into green gloom. And everywhere, even in the downpour, the glimpse of flowers, great banks of them, climbing walls, spilling over stone urns, carpeting the ground in impossible profusion. But it wasn't their size or number that struck her. It was the light. Despite the heavy sky, the low clouds, the persistent rain, the garden seemed to glow with a soft, internal luminescence. Not like neon, but like bioluminescence seen through deep water. A cool, silver-green radiance that seemed to emanate from the heart of the blossoms themselves, pulsing faintly. It made the rain-streaked world beyond the garden walls look even duller, even more asleep. And beneath it all, a sound, not quite audible at first, more feeling in her bones. A deep, resonant thrumming, like the vibration of a distant engine felt through the earth, or the slow, powerful beat of a giant heart submerged in dark water. It vibrated up through the Land Rover's tires, through the soles of her boots when she stepped out onto the gravel drive, squelching softly. Through her very bones, a low, subsonic OM that resonated in her skull, thrumming behind her eyes. It was immense and profoundly, unsettlingly alive. Mr. Hemlock handed her a heavy iron key. "The hall is yours, Dr. Vance. The garden is through the orangery doors. I trust you'll find your way. Supper is at 7, in the small dining room. Don't be late." He didn't offer a tour. Didn't ask if she needed anything. Simply touched the brim of his oilskin hat with a gnarled finger and walked toward the side door, leaving Elara standing alone on the rain-lashed steps of Blackwood Hall, the key cold and heavy in her hand, the subsonic thrumming of the garden vibrating in her marrow, and the sweet, cloying, metallic scent of the night bloomers thick in the damp air. The hall inside was a cavernous maze of high ceilings, dark with paneling and faded grandeur. Dust motes danced in the weak light filtering through tall, leaded windows. The air smelled of old stone, beeswax, and something vaguely metallic. Elara's footsteps echoed loudly in the entrance hall, a sound that felt jarringly loud after the muffled quiet of the rain and the garden's deep hum. Portraits of stern ancestors lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow her as she climbed the grand staircase to the east wing, where her rooms were apparently located. Her apartment was spacious, surprisingly warm, and furnished with comfortable, if slightly threadbare, antiques. A fire crackled in the grate. Mr. Hemlock must have lit it before fetching her. Rain lashed the tall windows, overlooking the gardens. From this vantage point, high on the hillside, she could see the full, breathtaking, and slightly terrifying expanse of the garden terraces, the silver-green luminescence of the flowers pulsing like captured moonlight in the gloom, the deep, subsonic thrumming of constant, physical pressure against the glass. She unpacked slowly, the quiet sound of her movements, the rustle of clothes, the clink of a mug on the bedside table, absorbed by the vastness of the house. The photograph of her mother found a place on the dresser. Her mother, forever smiling in the sun-drenched nursery, seemed a world away, a ghost of warmth and light in this damp, brooding, thrumming place. At 7 o'clock, Elara made her way down to the small dining room. It was a cozy, wood-paneled room warmed by another fire. A simple meal of soup, bread, and cheese awaited her on a scrubbed oak table. Mr. Hemlock sat at the far end, already eating, his movements economical, silent. He didn't look up as she entered, nor did he speak beyond a gruff, "Dr. Vance." When she sat down, they ate in near silence, broken only by the crackle of the fire and the drumming of the rain on the leaded windows. The subsonic thrumming of the garden vibrated up through flagstones, a constant, underlying presence that vibrated in Elara's teeth. It was impossible to ignore. It felt less like sound and more like the breath of the house and ground combined. Finally, pushing his empty bowl away, Mr. Hemlock cleared his throat. "You want to see it. The specimen. The heart of things." Elara nodded, the soup suddenly sitting heavy in her stomach. Yes, the letter mentioned a unique specimen. Hemlock's pale gray eyes fixed on her, sharp as flint. Unique. That's one word. Others might choose hungry or old. Very old. It doesn't like the light. Prefers the dark. The deep places, but it flowers at night. Oh, how it flowers. He paused, staring into the fire. Alistair Thorne. He was the last keeper. Before you. Elara leaned forward slightly. The previous owner? The letter was from the estate of Alistair Thorne. Hemlock nodded slowly. Aye, Alistair. Poor soul. He understood the garden song better than most. I'll grant him that. Spent 40 years listening. Became attuned. Perhaps too attuned. He vanished 5 years ago. Walked into the garden one night. Didn't come back. Just gone. Like mist under a morning sun. Only his boots left on the terrace. Polished them every Sunday. He did. Always polished. A cold finger traced Elara's spine. Vanished? Completely? Hemlock's jaw tightened. Completely. We searched. For weeks. The dogs found nothing. No trace. Not a scrap of cloth. Not a drop of blood. Just gone. As if the garden absorbed him. He turned his pale gaze back to her, searching her face. You have the ear, they said, like your mother, like Alistair. The garden needs a keeper who listens. Listens true, not just with the head, but with the bones, with the blood. He stood abruptly. The night bloomers are opening. Best time to hear them. To introduce you. He led her through a warren of dimly lit servants' passages, past the cavernous, empty kitchen, and finally through a set of tall, arched doors made of wrought iron and cloudy, rippled glass, the orangery. Stepping inside was like stepping onto another planet. The air was warm, humid, and thick with the now overpowering scent of the night bloomers. That dizzying cocktail of sweet decay, crushed mint, and sharp ozone, undercut by the ever-present metallic tang. It was humid enough to make Elara's glasses fog instantly, and the warmth was a shocking contrast to the chill of the hall and the storm outside. But it was a sound that truly arrested her. The deep, subsonic thrumming she'd felt since arriving was here a physical, tangible vibration in the air, a deep sound that resonated in her chest cavity, thrummed in her teeth, vibrated the very bones of her skull. It was a heartbeat of the earth itself, given sound, and woven through it, rising and falling like a chorus of distant, wordless voices, were the whispers, not the rustle of leaves, not the chitter of insects. Were there any insects? She hadn't seen a single one. But a sound like breath, like the soft susurration of many voices speaking just beyond the range of hearing. Murmuring secrets in a language felt more in the gut than understood by the mind. 1,000 overlapping sighs, questions, pleas, woven into a single, complex, haunting melody that seemed to emanate from the flowers themselves. The orangery was a jungle of exotic, nocturnal vegetation. Great, dark leaves the size of dinner plates. Vines heavy with blossoms like dripping jewels. But the true spectacle was a central bed, a sunken area perhaps 20 feet across, filled not with soil, but with what looked like ash. Fine, gray-black volcanic sand, perfectly smooth, utterly barren, and rising from its center on thick, mottled green stalks that seemed to pulse faintly with a silver-green luminescence, were the night bloomers. They were enormous. Each bloom was easily the size of a dinner plate, and they hung downwards like bells or inverted trumpets. Their petals were a deep velvety indigo, so dark they seemed to swallow the light, fading to a bruised violet at the frilled, serrated edges. At their very heart, where the stamen should be, was a core of pure, radiant, silver-white light that pulsed with a slow, rhythmic beat sound in perfect time with a deep subsonic thrumming. It was like looking at captive stars with a slow, steady blink of a colossal, slumbering eye. The light from these cores illuminated the ash bed and the undersides of the huge leaves with an eerie, silver-green radiance, casting long, shifting shadows that writhed like living things on the warm, humid air. The scent was almost cloying here, thick enough to taste sweet rot and cold metal and something deeply, unsettlingly alive. And the whispers were loudest here, a susurrating chorus that seemed to rise from the ash, from the glowing hearts of the blooms, from the very air Elara breathed. It was a sound that bypassed the ears entirely and resonated in the core of her being. 1,000 voices sighing, "Listen, listen, listen, feel, remember, join." Elara stood frozen on the threshold of the orangery, the warmth and humidity washing over her, the vibration shaking her bones, the whispers caressing the inside of her skull, the silver-green light painting the world in shades of dream and nightmare. Her breath hitched. Her heart hammered a frantic counter-rhythm against the deep, slow beating of the garden's heart. Mr. Hemlock stood beside her, a silent, watchful shadow in his oilskin coat. Utterly unaffected by the sensory onslaught, he simply stared into the sunken bed, his pale eyes reflecting the pulsing silver light of the blooms. "The heart," he murmured, his voice barely audible over the thrumming and the whispers, yet seeming to cut through them. "The singer, the first bloom. It's been here forever, longer than the hall, longer than the stones. It sings the garden into being, and it hungers." He turned his head slightly, his gaze finally landing on Elara, sharp as a shard of flint in eerie light. It needs a keeper to attune it, to understand its song, to feed it. He took a slow, deliberate step forward into the humid warmth, towards a sunken bed and the pulsing, whispering heart of the garden. Alistair listened. Hemlock continued, his voice dropping even lower, becoming almost intimate. He listened for 40 years. He became so attuned. He became part of the song. One night, he simply walked down, into the ash, to be closer, to hear better, to feed it properly. They say the blooms opened wide, and he stepped inside. Hemlock stopped at the very edge of the sunken bed, the silver light from the blooms illuminating his weathered face, making the deep wrinkles look like fissures in stone. He gazed down at the glowing, whispering flowers, a complex mix of reverence and something darker, hunger, resignation, in his eyes. "The garden remembers him," he whispered, almost to himself. "It remembers all its keepers, their fears, their joys, their longing. It drinks them in, like water, like light, and it grows. It remembers you, Elara Vance. Your mother spoke of you, her light, her gift, her grief, such rich ground for blooms." He finally tore his gaze from the flowers and looked directly at Elara, his pale eyes boring into hers. In the pulsing silver light, they seemed to reflect not the garden, but the endless, hungry dark beneath it. "It remembers the silence you carry," Hemlock breathed, "the space where your joy used to be. Such a sweet, sorrowful song. The garden is eager to hear it, to taste it, to make it part of the hum, part of the whisper, forever." He held out a gnarled hand, not toward her, but towards a sunken bed, towards the largest, darkest bloom, whose silver heart pulsed like a slow, hypnotic star. "Come," he said, his voice a low thrum that vibrated in her bones, harmonizing the garden's own deep song. "The singer awaits your introduction. It is time to begin your listening, Dr. Vance. Time to meet your charge. Time to attune." The warmth of the orangery pressed in, thick and cloying. The vibration was a physical force, a deep, resonant massage for her very selves. The whispers were a physical caress inside her mind, 1,000 voices sighing promises of oblivion, of communion, of an end to the sharp, ragged edges of her grief, to become part of the song, to become part of the garden, to be remembered perfectly, forever. The silver light from the blooms reflected in her wide, dark eyes. The sweet, metallic scent filled her lungs with every shallow breath. The deep, subsonic sound vibrated in her teeth, in her skull, in the pit of her stomach. A rhythm older than time, a call to stillness, to surrender, to becoming one with the endless, whispering dark. Mr. Hemlock stood silhouetted against the pulsing silver heart of the first bloom, a gaunt figure in oilskin, holding open the door to velvet shadows and resonant silence. The rain lashed against the fog glass of the orangery, a frantic counterpoint to the garden's deep, slow song, a reminder of the storm-lashed world outside this humid, luminous, hungry sanctuary. Elara Vance stood on the threshold, the key to Blackwood Hall cold in her pocket, the photograph of her mother a faint pressure in her jacket, the silence of her old life a crushing weight she hadn't fully realized she still carried. Before her, the garden breathed, glowed, whispered, and called. The deep, resonant sound vibrated in her marrow, a promise, a summons. The whispers sighed, 1,000 voices merging into one wordless, intimate plea. Come listen, stay. The silver light pulsed, inviting. The scent wrapped around her like a shroud. The vibration promised an end to the noise of the world and the grief and the self. Elara took a single, shuffling step forward off the cold stone threshold, onto the warm, packed over the path leading down to the sunken bed. The warmth seeped into the soles of her boots. The vibration intensified, a physical thrum that made her knees feel weak. Mr. Hemlock's pale eyes watched her, unreadable in the gloom. Another step. The whispers grew louder, clearer, weaving to the thrumming like silver threads through dark water. They spoke not in words, but in sensations. The warmth of sunlight on closed eyelids, the cool shock of rain on hot skin, the profound, aching comfort, perfect, silent understanding. They promised solace. They promised home. The first bloom pulsed before her, its dark indigo petals seeming to soften, to part slightly at the trembling silver core. Like a mouth, like a womb, the deep, subsonic sound resonated in her chest, a slow, powerful drumbeat that echoed the frantic hammering of her own heart, and then, impossibly, seemed to sync with it, slow it down, calm it, quiet it. The frantic rhythm of her fear, her grief, her fragile, lonely self, began to unwind, to loosen its grip, carried away on the warm, scented air and the resonant, wordless song. The world outside the orangery, the store in the hall, the city far away, the life she'd left ceased to exist. There was only the warmth, the light, the scent, the sound, and the slow, inexorable pull of the glowing heart of the garden. Elara Vance, botanist, keeper of silence and sorrow, took another step down into the sunken bed of volcanic ash, the silver light bathing her face, the whispers caressing her mind, the deep vibration massaging the tension from her bones, the sweet, metallic scent filling her lungs with every breath. The first bloom pulsed, a slow, hypnotic heartbeat of purest silver light, and it seemed to lean towards her, to welcome her, to invite her closer, to consume her. The ash was cool and fine beneath her boots. The air shimmered with warmth and silver luminescence. The whispers promised peace. The thrumming promised oblivion. And Elara, her own thoughts slowing, softening, becoming as diffuse as the mist rising from the warm earth, took another step, and another, drawn inexorably towards a light, towards a hum, towards a whisper, towards a beautiful, hungry dark at the heart of the garden, toward whatever waited for her there, beneath the pulsing, silver-white star and the warm, wet, whispering dark. The rain lashed the glass. The fire crackled in the hall far above. Mr. Hemlock stood silent on the path, a gaunt sentinel in oilskin, watching the newest keeper descend into the bloom. The garden breathed, and remembered, and grew, and the silence, Elara Vance's own particular silence, began at last to flower. Asterisk, and here the story lingers. Elara stands at the very edge of the sunken bed. The first bloom pulsed before her like a captured moon, its light painting her awestruck, terrified, yearning face in shades of silver and deep indigo. The whispers coil around her mind like smoke. The vibration thrums in her bones, a slow, hypnotic promise. The boundary between observer and observed, between botanist and bloom, between the woman who grieves and the garden that hungers.